right, good evening, everyone. I will officially call to order the annual Portland Public Schools budget hearing. My name is Harmony Kitos. I'm the chair of the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission. I welcome everyone to today's hearing. Nice to see everyone again after the levy hearing a month ago.
Yeah.
Okay, congratulations on the levy. We can start there. As a reminder, the TSCC is a community oversight commission established by the Oregon legislature more than 100 years ago. The commission oversees the budgets of all TSCC member taxing districts and annually conducts a thorough budget review and certification process. Additionally, the TSCC holds public budget hearings like this one to engage with district leadership and provide additional opportunity for public comment before the budget is adopted. I'll now ask my fellow commissioners and the staff to introduce themselves and state if they have any business relationships with the district that could be perceived as a conflict of interest. Start, Allison.
Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Lugo-Nab. I do not have any conflicts with the district. I'm also a parent of a 3rd and 5th grader for the next week at Atkinson DLI.
My name is Todd Burton. This is my first year, still my first year. Yes, I'm glad to be back seeing this board again, and congratulations on the passage of the school levy. That was so glad to be here again this evening.
Hello, my name is Mark Wold. I missed the levy hearing because I was traveling, I think. This is my 8th and final hearing with PPS. I term out, and so there'll be someone new in my seat next year. I have 3 children that graduated on the Grant High School track. They've gone on and they're doing well. Thank you for your help with that.
Awesome.
And my job when I was working, I'm now retired. I was a senior policy analyst in the President's Office of Portland State, and I have no real or perceived conflicts of interest with this district. Hello, Michelle.
Hi.
Good afternoon or evening. I work on that, but my name is Matt Donahue, 3rd year on the commission. My day job is as a financial advisor or investment banker to local governments, local and state governments. And I'm a parent of 2 daughters at Grant High School, the generals, and I don't have any business or conflicts with the district.
I'm Allegra Wilhite, Executive Director with TSCC.
I'm Judy Betchard, Budget Analyst with TSCC.
Again, my name is Harmony Kitos. This is my 6th year with TSCC. My 3rd year as chair. I have rising, almost, 2nd and 5th graders at Atkinson Elementary. I am a former chair of the Community Budget Review Committee for PPS. I started my career as a middle school math and science teacher and currently work in K-12 curriculum instruction, curriculum and assessment, but no conflicts of interest with the district. Near and dear to my heart. I'll hand it over to Superintendent Husk or Chair Hollins if you all want to introduce yourselves.
Awesome. I'm Gary Hollins, chair of the PPS board this year, and I will go start with my letter.
I am Sandy Husk, for 2.5 more weeks, the interim superintendent at PPS, and so happy to welcome Dr. Kimberly Armstrong here to join us this evening as she does her onboarding. And Kimberly, you can introduce yourself too. I just wanted to say.
Oh, absolutely. Should I go first? Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Myung Lee, and since this past August, I've been serving as the interim, as the name tent says, interim deputy superintendent of business and operations for Team PPS. I was not here at the May you're hearing about the levy. Congrats to everybody in the community, and thank you for your engagement on that. So I am serving in a large respect as interim CFO capacity going forward. While we noted that was one of your questions about leadership transitions in that particular role, and I'm glad to be part of the team in the meantime.
Michelle DePass, board member.
Kimberly Armstrong, incoming superintendent.
Welcome. We're so happy to have you.
So I have you back.
All right, let's start.
Herman Green, vice chair of the Portland Public School.
Eddie Wong, board member.
Addie Sullivan, board member. Julia Brim-Edwards, board member, good to see you for the third time.
Bernard Adams, I'm the Chief Accountability and Equity Officer for the district.
And Jay Buno, Chief of Student Support Services.
And I just might point out that we have Renard and Jay at the table because we know you might have some questions, but we do have additional staff that can answer questions if we need to.
We appreciate the deep bench that
Yes.
PPS always
Appreciate
brings
the-
to our hearing. We'd like to start by acknowledging the district's receipt of the Meritorious Budget Award from the Association of School Business Officials International for the 23-24 budget book. We like to highlight great, transparent, clear budget books. They're not only useful for us in our process and our analysis, but also just such a resource for the public in understanding where and how their tax dollars are being spent. So start with that. I'll give an opportunity for the district to provide some introductory remarks, after which we'll hear public comment, and then we'll ask questions and discuss the budget with you. Chair Hollins, do you have anything you'd like to start with?
I think, just beginning that, this budget cycle was of course challenging for everyone. No one wants to make cuts to, that affect our kids. And I think, with the amazing staff that we've had, kept a lot of those cuts away from the kids. And I think, that was our priority. And so, just, thanking our staff, our interim superintendent who came in with a fresh set of eyes, experience to prioritize certain things. I think it made for cuts, even though we didn't want to, but again, just made sure that they were far away from our kids so our kids can have the educational experience that they deserve. That's a speak.
Just to say that I got here on February 12th. I did some onboarding in January. And Guadalupe and Young and team had done a lot of the core work and following the values that Gary has outlined of trying to reduce staffing and reduce costs as needed. We try to protect programs. A few general comments. I think it was great that a lot of the instructional structures that are showing that the dial on academic achievement is moving. Graduation rates are in a good place, that those things have stayed in. I am very worried for the district going forward, knowing that there's a significant year of cuts coming up. So I did inherit that, and then we made a few adjustments as we moved forward. The board has made an adjustment in a recent motion that they made. Basically, Guadalupe and his team did a lot of the heavy lifting. The other thing I would say that typical budget process, even though in the public it only looks like it's a few months, behind the scenes it's a 12-month cycle. So the adjustment that had to be made after the strike, because we had a month lost, it was a very tight timeline for staff to come in and say, okay, how do we move this budget forward for the 24-25 school year? So huge kudos to the budget team and all the folks that had input into that. We did receive your questions. We have prepared some answers. We can talk through those or we can go more randomly, but you will have a printed copy of those.
Great, we love a written response. Also, many of you have been in the room with us. We love follow-up questions. So we'll start with the scripted questions and then we'll be sure to ask more. And feel free to read the written responses or share overall thoughts as well. With that, I will call on any members of the public who would like to speak. Each person is limited to 3 minutes of public comment, and we'll let them know when we're nearing the end of their time. Allegra, do we have anyone signed up to testify today?
We don't have anyone signed up. If there is anyone in the room, of course, please come and let me know, and we can make sure we have further time for public comment.
Great. So we'll try and provide time should someone join us later in the evening. And with that, we'll dive into our discussion. Allison has the first question.
Great, thank you. So we can all acknowledge that this has been a difficult budget year, and that the board has been tasked with making some really challenging decisions about where to cut. Could you share some about your process and how you chose what to prioritize for those cuts?
Yeah, our district is indeed experiencing challenging financial constraints, and because our revenues are not keeping pace with the cost of operating the school system, there will be reductions in the coming year throughout the organizations. We must balance the budget and continue to meet student needs, and that's the balancing act that we try to do. The reductions will impact all PPS communities in some way, shape, or form, which is some that we are trying to minimize. Student experience has always been a priority in our budget process, and the change is going to be very small this year due to the prioritization that we use. We center priorities when making decisions, especially when looking at the shortfalls that require large reductions. We prioritize what we call the big three bets, which is high quality, grade level, and standard aligned curricular materials, and hand of every teacher. And so those are the prioritization three things that we look at when doing reductions. We had a unified vision of what teaching and learning should look like in every classroom, every day, which we call our instructional framework. Also, finally, just in time, our job-embedded professional learning to strengthen instructional practices and expand teacher capacity. These investments represent our most promising levers to improve student outcomes and advance our district and board goals for student achievement. One of the early phases of the budget-making decisions was to design a core requirement for schools to align with district priorities. Phases that ensure schools are staffed to meet core programs, requirements, and contractual requirements. This year, PPS staff analyzed the overall system of school-based supports, including central and school-based positions. The goal this year was to be more strategic and provide specifics about allocations to schools that need additional support and identify and streamline areas of redundancy. One of the things that they looked at as far as the area of redundancy, is the pre-kindergarten and early learning and Head Start program offerings. The budget consolidates some of these services and spent a lot of months analyzing the programs to determine opportunities with streamlined resources while maintaining the same number of pre-K Head Start classrooms and the same high quality programming that for students and family. So, they looked at grading all of the funding sources and collapsing unnecessary sources or things that were duplicates as well. So those are some of the things. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
I had a question about that example. We met with the county early last week, 2 weeks ago, and talked a lot about preschool for all and that effort. Is there work being done to incorporate the Head Start, the pre-K programs here within that umbrella as an alternate funding source, or is there an effort to maintain our own PPS's own path? Anybody?
I don't know if I've got somebody behind me that knows that. Usually it's Leslie Odell, and her son just graduated. So she's having a family event. We can do a follow-up.
Sure.
And get you that.
Yeah, just curious how all of these districts intersect, right? Go ahead, Matt. I think we're continuing on this line of conversation.
Yeah, as you mentioned, and not only PPS is dealing with kind of the double whammy of federal COVID funds going away and enrollments dropping, that results in cuts. And as you said, there's going to be more cuts next year. So could you please talk about how the district plans to handle that and putting the district on a stabilized budget for short term and the long term?
So I'll take that one. I would say it's a triple whammy.
Okay. Left out a whammy?
Yeah, you left out a whammy. It's enrollment decline, the ESSER funds we are feeling, but I think this district made good decisions about knowing that those funds were going to go away and using them for one-time purposes. But I think the third part of the stool, and having been a superintendent back in 2006 to 2014, I can say that there is pretty distinct in disconnect between what the state funds and what the community wants in education. I believe that the current service level needs a serious deep dive to see if it even comes close to aligning to the quality QAM.
Education
QEM,
model.
Education model, thank you, QEM. There's lots of conversations with the superintendent groups that I'm participating in, or I have been, up to this point as to how do we participate on the governor's committees? How do we make sure that they understand that while the Student Success Act was a really good infusion of finance for school districts, those are designated funds. And what we're struggling with are the core functions, what it takes to run organizations of this size, especially with communities, which we're proud of, that demand high quality instruction, robust curriculum, lots of program supports, et cetera. So we can adjust on enrollment declines. It's not pleasant, right? We can adjust on the ESSER funds, but this overall, what I would call an inadequacy of the state funding formula in the state of Oregon needs some serious political lift. And I know we've got a lot of parents in this community, a lot of elected officials in the community, a lot of business leaders that will step up to that challenge. We're trying to get that stage set now through ACOSA, the Administrators Association. So when the biennium opens, we've raised the level of their understanding in the governor's office and at the legislative level.
So one thing I just,
I've got a follow-up on that.
Dr. Edwards, I think is gonna.
I was just
Oh,
gonna
I'm sorry.
add to that. First of all, passing the local option was a huge stabilizer. It's $100 million a year. So just having that in place creates a really strong foundation. In addition, on the enrollment, so having been around PPS for a long time, I've seen the enrollment go up and down. And some pretty big downs in the past. And one of the things that I think will benefit us is, like, I think part of the reason the enrollment went down is obviously COVID and big virtual learning, but then on top of that, the whole kids being out of school most of last November, that we had a strong end of the school year, and I'm really confident that we're gonna have a strong start to the next school year, and so rebuilding confidence in public schools for parents in this community. And also to communicate about the value proposition of Portland Public Schools. We have some, you're all parents, or any of your parents, so you understand the very really unique things that Portland Public Schools can offer students. I think we need to continue to communicate that to families because public schools are a great value proposition. And then the last thing I would say at the state level, in addition to the state school fund, there's other levers that PBS could potentially influence that could impact the amount of funds coming. For example, the formula. We don't have a cost of doing business. Obviously, it's much more expensive to do business in the metro area than it is in other places in the state. There's not really a factor for that in the formula. So there's some other places also, in addition to the items that Superintendent Huss mentioned, that we potentially could leverage more funds from PBS.
So the interim superintendent and Director Edwards, you both have mentioned the formula. And when I was at Portland State, and Portland State was a member of the Oregon University system, there was a formula. And everybody was trying to adjust the formula so that we could get more money into the universities. Is there a task force in this association perhaps that's working on tweaking the formula or resetting the formula or working on reevaluating the formula? It sounds like there may be structural issues as well as financial issues.
Yeah. The governor pretty much called the task forces together. COSA has a seat at the table. The systems that are about the size of Medford and above have been having weekly conversations about what we need to do to raise the understanding. I'm not a finance expert, but I'm guessing it's not going to be just a formula tweak. I think it really needs to be a strong recognition that we can't keep up with the infrastructures if we want to have a robust K-12 education system in the state of Oregon. So we're preparing to lean in without necessarily coming in with our own formulas.
Okay, thank you.
We've heard a lot about the state side of things, and I think there's different levels of optimism or pessimism around like how effective those changes might be. Is there work the district is doing internally structural to rethink some of our structures or approaches to the way we do business? You mentioned we're expecting more cuts next year. I think there's been just instability for a number of years, right? For a number of factors. So while the state is certainly one lever to pull, how that can go anyway, right? Lots of politics to play at that level. And I think lots of people getting engaged now, especially after the strikes and the conversations and cuts all around the state. But are there, I guess, also asking like at the district level, what are we doing to rethink some of the way we do business to try and stabilize in the long term, short term and long term, should maybe we don't get those formula changes or policy shifts at the state level?
I'm just going to speak because I'm almost like an observer
Yeah.
at this point. I'm sure there are some places to increase efficiency, but I'm also pretty comfortable saying that based on what this community expects the school district to offer and support, it will be impossible to make those adjustments at the district level through efficiencies. And so I think, and this board and this new wonderful leader will make decisions. I think the public engagement with our own employees around understanding what's going on with budgets, I think public engagements with our community about understanding what's going on, that what is creating these things that appear to be unstable from the outside, really need to be simplified and communicated often. And that's why I always mention the tight timeline. When you're working from, about beginning of 24 to putting this budget in front of everybody and getting closure, that's not enough of a timeline. You need a full 12-month cycle. And the example I would give, back in 2008 when the recession hit, 2009, Oregon started seeing, the huge cliff that was coming on revenues in the state. In 2010, a lot of districts made really drastic cuts, at least we did in Salem. We closed schools, we laid off employees. I mean, it was huge. I talked about it all of 2009 because everybody needed to understand what we were going through and that we could get through it. But we could get through it only for a certain number of years, and then we had to sustain and say, how are we going to build this back up? So I don't think efficiencies will be enough internally. That's my opinion. I don't know if Miana or board members want to weigh in.
The other thing I would just add to that is with 80 to 85% of our costs in personnel, and most of those in represented employees that we have contractual obligation that we've negotiated and negotiated what I think is a fair wage package for both the cost of living here in the metro area, but also for the work they do. So there's limited ability to change most of that. And as Director Hollins, Chair Hollins said, really with the focus of trying to keep our focus on school-based staff and school supports is that's a large portion of our costs, so it leaves a much smaller discretionary budget that you could actually influence and wring efficiencies out of, to Dr. Husk's point. So I think that work will continue, but it's just that piece of the pie isn't big enough.
When you talk about the expectations of, parental community and the community at large, is the largest driver of that, is that, can you identify, is it class sizes, is it program offerings?
I would say it's all of the above, and I think they go together. And my observation over the many years of doing this work is when you offer the number of robust programs that we have, career tech offerings, the dual language immersion offerings, all of the arts and the, special things that we have in the schools, it's a lot. And the community loves it. And they speak up loudly when they think that it's being, that base is being shaken. but it requires a lot of staffing to do that.
I almost have to apologize for this next question. I feel like I'm putting a little more salt in the wound. Picture, but-
You can bypass it.
You prepared an answer already.
Answer. And I'm sort of a geek on the board here as far as budget stuff, so I have to get asked a geeky question. So your approved budget includes an appropriation of about $1.8 million from your contingency to be spent on instruction, specifically for racial equity and social justice contracts. How does this change impact your projected reserve levels? And is it still within the policy, the level of 10%, I believe, is your policy goal for reserves? Are you moving towards that objective, or are you moving away from it by appropriating additional resources from your contingency and reserves?
Thank you, Commissioner. So I'll take that one. So the board's policy on reserves sets a goal of general fund reserves being between 5 to 10% of general fund revenues, annual general fund revenues. And that basically is just about, not quite accomplished in the budget that you're considering and we're discussing tonight. If the existing reserve, i.e. the beginning fund balance coming into this coming fiscal year, were to be included among total resources, then the budget would fall slightly short of 5%, that 5% minimum threshold. So that said, we staff will continue to update our financial projections, revenues, expenditures, fund balance projections, including closing the books for the year that we're wrapping up, 23-24, and we will update our beginning fund balance accordingly. So in that whole process, we'll be updating the projections for the following year, 25-26 year, which really represents the second year of a multi-year effort to bring our ongoing expenditures into balance with our ongoing revenues. So in looking ahead to the following cycle, as Dr. Husk said, really we're getting started now to kind of get the fact base organized and the timeline and key milestones organized for the following year, 25-26. We'll be updating the projections for the reserves that would otherwise happen if we didn't make some additional expenditure reductions. So that's kind of what's going on over the next several months. With respect to that 10% goal that is spelled out in that board policy, I'll say, and I'll defer to directors and Dr. Armstrong as well as Dr. Husk on this, but as staff, we've mostly been organizing our recommendations around maintaining that 5% reserve, the sort of lower end of the range that's in board policy for the near term. And to the extent some of these structural shifts and improvements can be accomplished, especially with the state budget, that would allow the district, the board, staff, the community to think more seriously, I would say, about moving towards that 10%, the upper end of that range for the policy. But right, so far, the last year or so, we haven't really been focusing on that 10% as much as the 5%.
Right. So, as a member of the CBRC, 2014 to 12 to 2018, helped draft that adopted reserves policy, and it was in the wake of the lead crisis and a hope that there wouldn't be that the district would be well positioned to face any unexpected challenges. Had we known the extent of the unexpected challenges that were to come with the pandemic, We're seeing more and more extreme weather events, a prolonged strike. I think I'd love to hear probably from board members about, the beginning fund balance, the reserves is essentially one-time money, is a fixed pool that you can only dip into so often to kind of solve ongoing issues and cuts. So I'm curious if you could give us some insight into like the decision to drop, because short answer, no, you're not meeting your 5% policy so far in this budget cycle. Some of the intent around that and the decision making that has led to where you're at now, and kind of the thinking around like what the efforts are moving forward, just given some of the unprecedented and unexpected things that we continue to see kind of year after year. Whomever.
Sure. Well, I'm going to, you made that kind of long. And as I remember, when we were talking about being, needing more money, we looked at our reserve to make it less painful. And decided that's what the reserve was for. I mean, it's not, obviously you'd like it forever, but it would have been much more painful if we had this. So that was my simple understanding.
That's what we were really looking at this. How can we reduce the impact immediately on kids and those that are going to need this support the most? You mentioned a lot of the things that you mentioned, the COVID. We mentioned the mental health issues that our kids that they're seeing right now more is more prevalent. We're coming into a time where kids are getting ready to be out of school and violence is outrageous, and we're starting to see more and more shootings, and we need more and more people that are going to be involved with kids on a daily basis, giving them something to do, somewhere to go where they can be safe. And so when we started thinking about how can we use the funds that we have to minimize the impact that our students are going to be facing, and we looked at the reserve and we said, it's raining right now and we can't use it all. There's no way that we can use it all. They would come in, they would take the schools from us, and there'd be nothing left. So we know that we can't use it all. So we began to think of, well, how can we use small portions of it to reduce some impact in some areas for those students that are most marginalized and need a lot more support? And how much are we actually talking about? And so at that point, it became a little easier to make a hard decision, one that you don't want to make and you wish you didn't have to. And at the end of the day, realizing that it was a decision that we needed to make in order to give our staff direction on where we wanted to see them go and how we wanted to see them move. So we made it. And we still come back to say that it's still not enough. We're gonna have to go back and we're gonna have to get people to come together. The only way we're gonna get to 10% in the reserves is you add more money to it to put there. The school districts are businesses. They don't make money. We don't have anything that we can sell, that we can create an income from. And barring having something like that can create and generate income, we're left with what you decide we're worth. And then you give us a little something. And then we have to figure out how to make that work, because that's all you're going to get. So be happy. And so we take what we got and we figure out ways to make it work. And we rob Peter to pay Paul until somebody else gives us some more money so that we can pay Paul and Peter at the same time. But at the end of the day, there's just not enough there. And so you want us to get to 10%? Give me some more money and I'll get you there. That, to me, that's the supplement.
So I have a camera that died here. I just need 1 minute to swap this with a different camera.
Sure.
Apologize, that would be a brief interruption. Thank you.
calculated, like I say, the 1.8 just happens to be the last piece, but certainly we funded some other things with other pieces of the reserves, as we said we were going to need to, and again, soften the blow. And I've been around long enough to know that I've seen it go from 300,000 of our reserves in 2001 to much healthier levels, and then dip down as we've needed to, and it's gone up and down, and I think that will happen going forward as well.
Vice Chair Green, you mentioned safety and the need for our students to feel safe in their schools. And we have a question about safety and security in the schools. Last year we had a rich conversation about this. You shared some work that you're doing and have been doing to improve safety and security in the schools, including the introduction of certified safety professionals, some new policies and procedures, training, and some building and design efforts. And it looks like maybe there's some building going on right over here right now. I don't know if we're gonna be safer and more secure facilities or not, but there's a lot going on. So are you seeing results from this work? And can you tell us how the number of safety and security incidents as a result compared this year to last year?
I'll let Dan answer that. I will say in general, we have an amazing team under the leadership of Molly, always virtually and physically. And she did use a lot of data to drive the decision making, and Dan is his supervisor, and I asked him to come up to the table to kind of weigh in at a higher level, and then Molly's available if you need more details.
Hello everyone, Dan Young, Chief Operating Officer. Yeah, we're happy to be able to increase our security and personnel, our safety procedures last year. In the written response, there's a good amount of data on the number of instances over the last 2 years, so I won't read all those unless you want me to. But in summary, the additional campus security personnel increased our ability to be proactive in identifying potential safety concerns through increased our daily safety and security assessments. And also allowed more effective and quick responses to those safety incidents when they did occur. We added personnel across the district to make sure we had multiple staff at each of our high schools. We also elongated the time that they were at our high schools. We ensured every middle school had at least one dedicated safety associate, and we increased capacity to support our elementary schools and our rovers that moved throughout the site and even cover our non-school campuses to some degree. And so with that, we saw in some cases an increase in the total number of incidents, but we largely attribute that to our increased ability to respond to the incidents, so like we saw more graffiti and vandalism and things like that. But in other cases, such as trespassing or theft, we saw those incidents go down, which we attribute at least in part to having more campus security associates on site to reduce those instances. So that's
Would you be comfortable in telling me, Student Director Silverstein, how do you feel in school? Do you feel more safe? Do you feel less safe? What is your experience like?
Like in comparison from this year to the past year? Sure.
Yeah.
The past couple of years. Well, I honestly would say that I do probably feel a little bit more safe. Just like service level wise, maybe not when I really like contemplate that, but last year there were just a lot of high profile incidents which I think really contributed to that, like especially around my school, like actually a car near my school was shot at. So it was, I think, on people's minds a little bit more last year. And with this year, I think that also the discussions that were had, obviously not completely like eased everyone's concerns, but it did feel really, really helpful that there was that open dialogue. And, to know that people do care and that is something that we're taking very seriously.
All right, thank you.
I've got the next question. Harkening back to all the conversations during the strike and the information or misinformation and what was in the news and what were heard from different stakeholders, we heard lots of discussions about the number of administrative versus central office versus school-based staff, and how PTS was different than some of the other districts. And I think we're asking maybe clear the air or clarify for the community what that actually means. Is is the comparison of central office versus school-based support similar to other districts in our state or similar to other large urban districts, some of our, our comparators? And if not, how do those differences play out and how has it changed over time?
So I've worked in 3 states and 5 central offices, 3 in the top seat, 4 if you count this one, which I do count.
You've earned it.
Thank you.
Whole budget cycle.
And this is always a topic in every district that I've been associated with, because it's easy to see the people in the schools that are needed because we're used to being in schools. It's harder to see the people in a central office that are needed because not all of us are used to running large organizations. But in terms of percentages, about 90% of the PPS staffing positions are focused on instruction, classroom, and building support roles, and about 10% represent central office, which include vital functions like payroll and HR and technology systems and facilities, research, and I could go on and on. Our class sizes, so that's pretty typical. It's pretty typical for this state. I can't say that I haven't done a national look. On class sizes, we compare very favorably. Our class sizes averages tend to be much lower than averages of other districts in the state. And I'm sure there's some exceptions on the ends.
It's just as a follow-up to that. So we also know, and we've seen, because our staff works with your budget staff, that there's been a significant turnover in central office staffing, probably due to some of the instability in funding, the need for cuts, and any other factors, a difficult economic, a bigger economic picture as well. Can you give us some sense of some of those ideas, why this turnover is occurring, and what the impacts are from these sorts of staff changes, and what the district's doing to kind of mitigate those challenges, especially in some of the key functions that keep the district running?
We weren't really sure about the background of the question, so we answered it in 2 ways. Sure. In terms of the superintendent, I think it was really stable, like twice the national average. He was here almost 7 full years. And I do see examples outside of the finance team where people are promoting up. They promote up, they come back, to another promotion up, and you're going to get that, especially in a metro urban area where it's easy to drive from one district to another. You're just going to see that when you hire well, they will promote up. In terms of the finance team, I would say that there has been quite a bit of turnover there. In general, it's really hard to find CFOs in school district business right now. I've, again, struggled with it in every place I've been. And I do think that this particular budget has got a really heavy workload. The expectations, the exposure in the media, the exposure to the wonderful community review committees, that's not something you get in other sized districts. When you're the largest in the state, it carries a heavy factor. And we've looked at some of our compensation, and frankly, it may be that we have to look at that again if we want to get the stability that we need. I've been very worried, not about Myung, not about this team here, but I've been very worried about the long run. When Myung's retired, he deserves to eventually say I'm done, and how we get a team in to shore up the wonderful workers that are here. And so HR has been working on that diligently, and I'm sure with Dr. Armstrong's help, they'll dive back into that again.
So reports in the media about the effect of reductions on special education services in the district as part of the cuts in the budget. Could you provide us with a summary of how special education funding is changing in this budgets and what how the students will be affected by those changes?
This is your cue, Jay.
Sure. So this year we are initiating our special education improvement plan, which is rooted in our strategic plan So this plan is organized to address our students' level of need, persistent gaps in achievement, and more importantly is focused on what we've heard from our families and our students for increased need for engagement and belonging in their schools. It's also informed by an external special education program review and direct input from our stakeholders, which includes our staff and our school leaders, in addition to families and students. Implementation of this plan, like I said, began this year and is frequently referred to as a neighborhood schools plan. That's been in the media also. And this year's been focused on 2 schools. In the future, we'll be moving into 6 schools for next year, and then in the future into all of the elementary schools on indoor secondary schools. So program shifts that are foundational to this plan were initiated this year, focusing on implementation for the fall. And these program shifts are required to support students in their neighborhood school. And these coincidentally happen at the same time, so these staffing adjustments happen at the same time due to our labor agreements that our budget process is happening. And so what is occurring is these philosophical shifts and actions require moving from an allocation of staffing from centralized support roles to staff being allocated to building support roles to support instruction of service delivery in our schools. And so what the budget includes is a combination of funding functions, general funds and grant funds that in total includes an actual increase in licensed special education staff of 7 FTE in comparison to last year's adopted budget, and an increase in classified staff of 8 FTE from last year's budget. And then in addition to that, every allocation move that's been made from Central Special Education Department will not change students' identified service needs outlined in each student's individualized education plan. And the district will continue to train and support the staff that serve the students with IEP-related needs, and the system move or model of school-based support. And if a student requires a specific need, that need will continue to be provided. So.
Sure.
Forgive my ignorance. One of the groups that we speak to early on in the process of many, many hearings and certifications is Smalloma ESD. And to my understanding, it sounds like they provide some of the services that you're describing now. And so I guess my question is there like an overlap between what you're doing with your FTE and what they can provide in their smorgasbord of services? And if there is that a more efficient way to serve that need by getting more help from the ESD? Just curious.
So we access MESD for a few things. One of the services we access them for is our nursing services that we have in all of our buildings. In addition to that, we access them for specialized student placements. And so they serve and support us in that way. Outside of that, as a district, we provide and serve our own needs.
Okay.
I have a follow-up. Just being a parent on playgrounds, read in the news. I have a neighbor with 2 students with special needs. They both have feeding protocols, and so news about reduction in the feeding team. It's like, well, what about my kids? Are they going to be okay? There's a 0.2 FTE PE teacher at our school. We have ISC classrooms at our neighborhood school. That 0.2 PE teacher has been providing adaptive PE for that class. Again, that's going away next year for some of the reasons you've talked about, kind of some of the shifts in model. And I think what I'm curious is like, how are you communicating with parents and communities that, especially with the most vulnerable students, about safety, about like ensuring those needs are met, even though there are cuts or changes to the services, because I think that's like what's not coming that's not what's coming down to the, we hear it from the principal level or from a news article, and then there's some measure of panic or concern in families.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. We actually throughout the spring we've reached out to each one of our families that are served in our specialized classrooms, and we've invited them to engagement sessions. Specifically, our family liaisons have hosted these, where we have facilitated that conversation with what is happening versus what has been heard about. Those actually, they've wrapped up. We are talking about continuing to hold a couple of summer, but those are posted on our website, and we're talking about how to continue to communicate those out. But that's one of the ways that we're doing that. The other thing that is something that I want to just put out there is that the message is that we aren't having some of these specialized teams anymore, and that's actually not accurate. We will continue to have specialized teams and experts, but our focus is to not have one centralized medical model support system. We want to increase the capacity of our specialists across the system to serve kids, because that way we're not impacting the services students could have. We still will have an expert because we have students with significant needs that our staff will need to consult with. And every opportunity I get to communicate that out, we continue to do that. In addition to that, we will continue to have adaptive PE. We have just staffed to our level this year. Anyway, those are a couple ways that we are continuing to try
Verbatim sharing some of the things that I've heard, but I'm curious. So on that, you mentioned capacity building, in all of our communities. I'm curious if there's some of that capacity building work, just around how, the shift to a neighborhood model, a more inclusion model, the capacity building and professional development for your administrators and general education teachers to kind of move to that model and be able to talk and communicate about that model, so there isn't that maybe fear in the same way.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a significant shift for the system. That is one of the reasons why we're approaching it with such intention and going very slowly to do it well. And so that's why we started with 2 schools this year, and we're moving to 6 next, and then we'll approach it in that manner. And consequently, we're engaging very intentionally with the staffs at those schools to help support just exactly what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Following the recent school closures due to extreme weather events, how is PPS evaluating its emergency preparedness protocols? And what we mean by that, not just the snow and ice that prevent people from traveling safely to the schools, but when there's physical damage to the school, which I believe happened last winter to at least a couple of schools, and you had some downtime for an extended period of time. Are you evaluating what could be done to help mitigate those impacts, and particularly as it affects instruction for the kids?
That's gonna be a Dan. Good Dan.
Thank you for the question. Following that January storm, we are definitely going through and evaluating our emergency preparedness protocols to ensure that we're better equipped in the future. It's worth noting that January storm was pretty unique. It's not common that we have storms that have that much cold for that long, that causes the governor to declare a state of emergency. We have staff, we have some of our maintenance staff have been here for over 40 years. They don't recall anything to that level. But that said, it was a unique storm, and it did cause pretty severe damage. So we are in the process of completing a comprehensive after action report to see where we can improve. And some of those areas that we're specifically looking at is reviewing our communication strategies. We've got lots of people to communicate to. We have tens of thousands of students and parents. We also have our staff. We have our staff that are in the buildings, our staff that need to report during these instances. So there's just lots of different ways and different messages that need to be communicated in these type of events. looking at our coordination with our local utility companies and other emergency providers and other responses. So those are some of the categories in the after action report. I think it's worth noting that our modernized schools and our updated schools did not experience severe damage. It really are much older aged facilities that had impact. We had, I think it was 21 schools total that had damage, some from not too much damage to schools that had to be closed for an extended period of time. So that just highlights the need to prioritize investing in replacing, responding to our aging building systems or roof systems or window systems or mechanical electrical plumbing systems. That's in a nutshell.
And that was really our follow-up is, are you evaluating it from the perspective of what you can do to prevent this from these kinds of incidents, causing more physical damage to schools as you plan your capital for upgrades?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things the district is doing is planning for a future general obligation bond. We're executing right now, we're planning for a future one. And right now in the sample option, there's significant dollars to address for maintenance. For maintenance, we know our biggest problems are our building systems, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, then our exteriors are roofing and our exteriors.
I was going to ask you, what would be examples of those kinds of investments would be what you just HVAC,
roofing, plumbing in particular. Has not got a lot of roofs have actually gotten quite a bit of attention, and the roofs have done actually pretty well, but a lot of other systems have not. And so our plumbing is a big one. We have very old pipes. We actually have in my office, like just some of the pipes that came out of these buildings, and they look like they're 80 years old. And they don't do well with prolonged freezing temperatures.
Back in the day, they used to be made of wood.
They wouldn't be great.
Yep.
So along the lines of infrastructure and construction, we know that construction costs for Jefferson High School continue to grow. Will those increases be covered by contingency? And if not, what is the plan for covering those cost increases? And what lessons have you learned that you can apply to future capital projects?
Yeah, that's a great question. Back in April, the Jefferson project team presented a all new construction option for Jefferson High School to the Board of Education, and we are proceeding forward with that model. That revised plan has an estimated cost of $491 million, which is $125 million over what the existing general obligation funds can fund. So with that general obligation bond that we're planning for the future, the funds necessary to complete Jefferson are included in that package. So that is where the remaining funds will come from when we do a future bond. Regarding lessons learned, there are lots. And one we just noted here is important in particular, Jefferson is a unique project. It's over 100 years old, that building. It's 4 stories. It has some historic features to it. It's on a very tight site. Is to bring the general contractor in as early as we can. When you have these when you're building something brand new, it's fairly straightforward for a design team to design it, a professional estimator to estimate it, and then that's what we build our budgets on. This is such a unique project. It's really hard for the designers to understand the capacity and for the estimators to estimate all the needs and the sequencing and the phasing of this type of project. So that was one of the big challenges that once the contractor came on site and was able to give us more accurate cost estimates, there was lots of phasing type of costs that were missed. The other is construction cost escalation continues to be extremely high in the Pacific Northwest as compared to the rest of the country. So building in more contingencies, building in larger project contingency and program contingencies are all things that we are trying to do as well.
As a follow-up, in the past, I know for some of the high school construction, students were placed at Marshall pretty far southeast of that. He's not planned for Jefferson. His parents were upset about that. And so can you tell us a little bit about where students will be as construction continues and how you came to that?
Yeah, we looked at a number of options. Marshall was one option. We looked at trying to just create like the modular city out there on the site, which didn't work out very well. So they are staying in the existing structures while we built the new school. And we will relocate to the new building because that's what we demolish the existing structure. There's some phasing to that, so it's a little oversimplified, but that's the general.
When do you expect to complete construction?
Phase 1, remove the students into the new buildings is fall of 2028, and then demolition and the completion will be after like another site improvements will be the following year. So
And continuing on the bond conversation, the last couple of years, we've talked about kind of trying to drill down into what the Center for Black Excellence will be. It's one of the bond projects highlighted in the 2020 school facilities bond. In the last couple of years, I heard from you about the community engagement work to see what that would look like, what's needed, what would the facilities and capital projects possibly be. So we'd love an update on the latest progress. What's the status of the Center for Black Student Excellence? Is it a build? You know, where are we at in that conversation?
I'm happy to jump in
Sure.
with that. As we've shared before, we've had a lot of community engagement. I can't remember the number, but I know it was over 100 engagements with the community to think about and conceptualize the Center for Black Student Excellence and where, and because of that, we now have a vision document around the center, and we think of it as a place, a physical place, an approach to teaching students who are Black or African American, and a redesign of the system, which we know doesn't always support those students to their maximum extent of their ability. And so those are sort of the three prongs we think about. The physical infrastructure, the plan right now is for the center to be approximately 45,000 square feet and for it to share a structure with a K-5 learning lab. So it'll be on and a part of a existing school site. The PK5 space is derived from our educational specifications, so it'll be built as if we were building, as it will be, a new elementary school in PPS. And then from the engagement and functional goals of space programming, space needs were designed and developed. And so we can get you a copy of the vision document, but it has some imaginings of what spaces will look like within the center and things like that. The next steps, and Dan could probably speak to this more than I can, but we need an architect to actually bring the vision and some of the space designs to life, and then engaging consultants who will continue to work on site planning because we still haven't landed my understanding on an exact physical location.
Do we have an idea of the timeline of those projects? So the 2020 bond is this far into life. We just talked about how Jefferson is going to need the next iteration of the bond. Just give us a big picture. How many 2020 bond projects are we not going to finish before you have to go out for another bond?
I'll take that
Yeah.
one. So right now the discussions have been about going out for another bond in November of this year. We will still have significant funds from the 2020 bond
to spend
down. So there's going to be several more years of work with 2020 bond work, which isn't unanticipated. The district has had this sort of overlapping bond sequence plan for over a decade now. And so I don't know the exact timeline, but we anticipate having all the 2020 bonds spent roughly next, let's say, 6 or 7 years to complete that work. And then the 2024, of course, bond, or the next bond, that work will overlap and will continue beyond that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And we'll be back in the fall to ask all of those bond questions. And you get to see us again this year. It's great. I think with that, knowing that you have a board meeting immediately following this meeting, give you maybe a minute.
Can we just get my question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have? I was like, nah, we're done. We're gonna call it. No, we have a minute. Nah, go ahead.
Ask this question. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I would just want to say thank you all for your service on behalf of the district. Tough times. I know it's really tough, and I really appreciate it. As a parent, PBS education has been great for my daughters, and I've had an excellent experience. And now they're only be there for a couple more years, but I think the schools that they've been to in the district has really provided them with a great education. So that's in preference. Yeah. So my daughter, who is a sophomore in Grant, she has actually been to one of these meetings before. She knows that I'm coming as a budget. So she raised an issue that is near and dear to her heart, and please feel free to punt if you want, but if you could give me something to tell her, that would be great.
We want to send you home as a champion.
So apparently at Grant, they're spending, this is according to her, $60,000 on pouches so that she can't use her iPhone during school hours. And so she wants to know why they're spending money on keeping her iPhone prisoner when they're cutting a makerspace at the same time in the school.
You want to address that from a policy standpoint?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna speak to the specific grant situation. I think it was in response to staff concerns and community concerns. I will say, just so she doesn't feel picked on, that there is a broader conversation about developing a comprehensive policy on cell phones in schools in the policy committee, I'm the chair of the committee. So we've been actively discussing it. I think it's worth noting that Grant wouldn't be the first school in the metro area to use they're called Yonder pouches, they're like you use at a concert. Mount Scott Learning Center, which is a smaller alternative program, currently uses them, and from the staff and student perspective, they are very positive outcomes. They've had it for quite a while, and there's a lot more engagement with students, a lot less distraction in classrooms, and the students are free to use their phones after the school day and before the school day, but when they walk in the school, they're focused on the classroom and also their relationships with their peers, not on their phone. So it may just be Grant is the leader, not the only one, and the issue related to cost is a good one. We actually just yesterday were talking about that cost because that may be the sort of entry point for other schools that certainly would be a consideration of what the cost is, and there may be solutions other than buying the Yonder pouch that could address the issue in different ways that doesn't require an expenditure of funds.
You can also talk to her about salary and compensation versus a one-time purchase.
You are a finance person.
Yeah, I'm not sympathetic to her play.
But he has to ask the question.
He does. She has.
The daughter told him to ask the question. And I understand, as a father of 3 girls, you would have been in trouble had you not. You know she's watching right now.
Well, she has attended these meetings in person, and so we want to really value that time.
Absolutely.
Future TSCC commissioner.
Future, yeah, we are.
Absolutely.
With that, I'll just close out our discussion with a thank you to all of you, especially to our board members who are volunteers in our community and giving of their time and so much time and energy to engage with us as representatives of the broader community. We appreciate your candor and your thoughtfulness and your willingness to answer tough questions, not just from us, but from your constituents every day. So just start with that, thank you. With that, we have some procedural work to do, so I will close the hearing and open a regular business meeting of the TSCC. Do any other commissioners have any further thoughts on the budget?
I just wanted to thank Dr. Armstrong for being
Yes.
here. Is this your first public meeting at this?
Besides your higher
No,
meeting?
you probably were, I don't know if you, I was here as chief academic officer, and I remember answering some of these
Yeah.
questions
Oh.
last year. I'm happy to be back, thank you.
Welcome back.
Well, we'll be back next year.
And in the fall.
And this year.
See you then.
Allegro, can you provide the executive director recommendations for the certification letter?
Yes, and I get a soundtrack.
Sure.
This is more festive than usual.
Background music.
I love it. Okay, so yes, I'd be happy to provide those. I did first want to say that it's just been such a pleasure, as always, to work with the budget and finance team at PPS. As we have gone through multiple times in this hearing, it was an especially difficult year, and I know how hard that team worked, the permanent staff, the interim staff, because you have a useful and comprehensive budget document, and the staff will reach out when they have questions to make sure there's compliance with budget law, which we so appreciate. So just really a fantastic group that you have that's put in above and beyond this year, certainly. So with that said, we as staff found the budget estimates to be reasonable for the purposes stated and in substantial compliance with budget law. Staff suggests no recommendations or objections to the fiscal year 24-25 approved budget.
May I have a motion authorizing the commission to sign the certification letter as recommended by staff?
I'll move.
We're trying to
will
give
sec-
Mark all the
This is
opportunity
my last go
last.
round, so I'm not gonna take that one, because my kids are grown and gone. so. Okay, I will second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The PPS budget for 24-25 is so certified by TSCC. Allegra will follow up with a certification letter to file with your budget very shortly. So with that, I will adjourn our meeting. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.